How would you describe the state of Portland streets?
I would say that what we see on our streets is misery everywhere we look. And my biggest fear is that it's only going to get worse in January.
So you rent in Portland.
Yes.
You often say that there are homeless camps right outside your apartment.
Yes.
How does that play a role in your stance to this crisis?
Well, the homeless camp outside of my apartment isn't the only one that I go talk to people. I walk around my neighborhood. I talk to people who are living in RVs, living in automobiles, and so I'm informed all over the city talking to people who are experiencing houselessness. And I can tell you a lot of people who are houseless today work. They just can't afford first, last, and security deposit to move into a market rate unit. As we've learned recently, what we've been calling affordable housing is absolutely not affordable at all if it's at 80% of the area median income, which means you basically have to make $70,000 to qualify for that affordable one-bedroom unit. Then we learned that the policy that we've had in place exempts units that are 15 years or younger, which again, here we are telling people we're building affordable housing, and in fact, we have thousands of people facing eviction next year because when rent goes up 14.6%, living on a fixed income and in buildings we've told them is affordable, it's only going to get worse, which is why I really keep encouraging Commissioner Ryan and the mayor. They have to think much bigger than the way they've been thinking. We have one superpower as the city, which is the power of eminent domain. We have a lot of empty, derelict buildings all over this city, and the city should now actually use our power of eminent domain, put those properties in a public land trust, and restrict development all over the city to 60% of area median income. Because just like we're pricing renters out, we're also pricing small businesses out.
So Portlanders across the board believe there needs to be change in the city's response to this crisis. What in your eyes isn't working with how the city responds? What would you do differently if reelected, and why haven't you done it already?
Well, let me just say I've never had the Housing Bureau in my portfolio. I don't supervise the Joint Office of Houseless Services, but what I would do, what I think should happen differently, because of my leadership, Commissioner Dan Ryan is in a position to renegotiate the intergovernmental agreement with the next Multnomah County chairperson. If I was a queen of the universe for a day and had housing, I would immediately, after the November elections, convene a meeting with the next governor, the next county chair, and our federal delegation, and I would actually create a work group and say, how are we going to address this issue? Because it's not just a Portland issue, this issue is a national issue. One thing we could do right now, right after the election, is to have a special session or call a meeting of the emergency board and allocate $1 billion statewide to housing people could actually afford to live in. We need the legislature help, we need the federal government's help, and I have those relationships all across the board, but again, I've never been in charge of housing, but this is information I've been providing to the mayor and to Commissioner Ryan for the last couple of years.
Okay. Mayor Wheeler's homeless plan to build 3 large homeless campuses over an 18-month period and ban unsanctioned camping. You said you were disappointed with the lack of details in funding and that it needs to be more urgent. Can you explain your stance on this, and what do you propose that they do differently?
Well, the mayor wants to take 18 months to develop a plan to get funding and to launch the first whatever he's calling those camps. If there's a sense of urgency, and again, what's come in front of us has no dollars attached to it, no plan about how we accomplish it, no sites already pre-selected. So if there's this real sense of urgency, and this isn't just a political stunt, we should have much more detail, and we should actually be on a much faster track. As you know, we're under the 3rd mayor that declared a housing emergency. I'll give you one great example. Faith institutions have been coming to us over and over again saying, you know, we'll let homeless people camp, a certain number camp on our property. That way they can use our facility to wash their clothes and to get ready for job interviews, et cetera, et cetera. And the Joint Office has absolutely refused to permit churches from doing that, faith institutions from doing that. And I have to ask, why? A, why do they need a permit? And B, Why are we not taking every offer of housing support we can get when the community is ready to help?
You often say that housing the homeless in vacant buildings could be a potential solution, but many of those neighbors may fear that drug use and violence will then come into the area.
Well, I think they're saying that now with people camped all over the city. I'm kind of appalled that our first priority would be massive outdoor camps when we have so many empty buildings all over the city. I would think the priority would be getting people in out of the element as we start getting ready for winter to actually roar into our area. So, to me, if we're talking about how do you address these issues humanely and in a way that actually builds on success that we've had, that would be the way to do it.
One of the amendments that you're suggesting is having the 3 large camping sites spread across the city, not in just one targeted neighborhood. Do you have any examples of where those could be?
Let me just say that I am not supporting 500-person camps anywhere. What I know is that normally 40 to 60 people should be the maximum. And I want to remind you that when Commissioner Dan Ryan was trying to put his Safe Villages together, he found it pretty challenging because guess what? No one wanted a safe village in their neighborhood with 100 to 120 plus homeless people. I think the mayor would find it impossible to find a place where the community would welcome 500 houseless people living together willy-nilly.
So you don't have any examples of where even smaller versions of these campuses could be?
Well, I can tell you that all over the city there is land that is vacant that no one is planning to build on anytime soon. So using our power of eminent domain, we could capture that land now, temporarily put people on it, and then in 3 years release it back to the people who own it. As we start building housing people can afford to live in. And I want to be really clear, we cannot do that unless we land bank land the city already owns, because we're not getting any more land, right? And so we have to take the land we own and protect it so that people at all income levels will continue to be able to live, work, and play in the city of Portland.
What's your response to the homeless who choose to stay in their tents and don't want to go into some campus or Safe Rest Village or shelter?
Let me just say, there are many reasons why people say no thank you. The number one reason is because most of these shelter beds that are offered for one night. And at 6 a.m. the next morning, guess what? You're still houseless. So we have actually not solved the problem at all. The same is also true for sweeps. Remember the mayor's declaration around getting people off the freeways? Yeah, does it for a week. Surprise, surprise, they come back. Because unless we've found somewhere for people to safely be, I've been asking that question for over 3 years. If not here, where? Where do people get to camp, right? Where they're not going to be harassed. And here's what I'll tell you. Once we take care of the people who just need to be stabilized so that they can get their lives back on track, then we'll be really clear about all the people who need mental health treatment. I see those folks every day. I ride public transit. We have nowhere for those folks to go. Whether the police are taking them or Portland Street Response, there's nowhere to take them. So until we get the beds to get people treatment, that's the big unanswered question right now.
Do you plan to vote to pass all 5 resolutions tomorrow or no?
Well, it depends on how many of my amendments are actually incorporated into the final document.
Okay. You oversee PBOT.
Yes.
How will you work to enforce the mayor's ban on high crash corridors, which many of those camps are on PBOT property?
Well, as you know, I don't have the Office of Houseless Services. We give them $40 million a year to address camp cleanups. PBOT's job is not to do camp cleanups. That is not our role. Our role is to actually provide the infrastructure for transportation in the city of Portland. So my employees aren't impacted at all by the mayor's declaration.
Okay. How will you create a successful, affordable housing strategy for Portlanders?
You keep acting as if I have housing in my portfolio.
This says it on your website, though, is what you plan to do if reelected.
Well, and this is what I said I would do. I mean, we have to put the land we own into a public land trust, and then we have to partner with community-based nonprofits, right? What we know is the only people who are building housing people can afford to live in are nonprofits. Developers will still be able to develop we have a whole lot of beautiful brand new buildings that no Portlander can afford to live in right now, right? And so we're not having a problem building market rate housing. We've got it all over the city. That's not a problem. The problem is people who work for a living cannot afford first, last security deposit and pet deposit. $1,600 is what a one bedroom is, average today, market rate. And if you work as a barista or in a restaurant or a hotel, where do you live in the city of Portland? And what we're seeing is it's becoming less likely that working people will be able to continue to live in the city of Portland. And so again, it's not something the city can do by itself, but the city has to be the visionary about what's possible and stop kowtowing to developers.
You say in your 3 years on council, you've accomplished the highly effective Portland Street response that reduces the workload on the Portland Police Bureau. However, those workers are inundated with calls. Last month, they received the most amount of calls they ever have, and they still have to return some of those calls to the Portland Police Bureau.
Yes, as you know, we are still rolling out Portland Street Response citywide. On July 1st of this year, in fact, I was authorized to expand Portland Street Response citywide. So you're talking about going from 4 workers to about 70 plus workers, and we're in the process of hiring and training. And again, Portland Street Response goal is not to go from call to call to call. It was created so that it could provide care to people where they are, when they need it. And sometimes that takes an hour, sometimes that takes 2 hours, sometimes they do follow-up days later, right? So the purpose of Portland Street Response is not to just jump from call to call. I will tell you, because of my leadership, I have made sure that we are not overwhelming Portland Street Response as they are rolling out. I meet with the directors of all the first responder bureaus monthly to watch the implementation. Many people think once you pass a law, that's good to go, right? But the thing I learned was that they were segregating Portland Street Response from going to training with patrol officers. No, they have to go and see patrol officers, and they're in-service training because it's important for them to understand what role Portland Street Response workers play in our new first responder system. And you know, the police are used to being the ones kind of setting the table, and now they have to actually have to understand that the table is broader now, and it has more players. And those patrol officers on the street need to know that before they go out and encounter them on the street. They were having them, like, really trying to redirect them to the behavioral health unit officers, which will be the least likely officers that Portland Street Response would engage with on the street. Another thing was they were trying to give them a different code if they were in distress. As you know, when you're working with people who are suffering mental health issues, sometimes you may need help. And first responders have a specific code. They wanted Portland Street Response to have a different one. Had I not been monitoring the implementation, we would not be implementing it in a way that was intended when the City Council voted unanimously for us to move forward.
There's a lack of addiction and mental health treatment facilities
Yes.
in Portland.
Yes. In Oregon.
Yes. Do you think we need more things, more programs like Portland Street Response to handle it?
Well, the good news is that because of modeling Portland Street Response first as a pilot, and now having the authority to expand it citywide, across the country, people are looking at us as a model on how you have an unarmed response to people suffering mental health issues. So the answer is absolutely. I've been working with Senator Wyden, who is working to make sure that we can get reimbursed for the medical treatments that we're providing on the street. So I'm working system-wide to make sure that as we expand first responders, that they are seen as the professionals they are. And as your listeners may not know, that Portland Street Response has a certified mental health professional, a social worker, and a peer supporter who show up on the scene to assist when someone is in need.
Your opponent in this race calls you the most radical member of City Council on these issues, and at times the most passive with respect to addressing unsheltered camps.
I'm not quite sure what my opponent means by that. I'm really clear about my role and my role of making sure that we are taking care of the people in the city of Portland. And that's why I've been focused trying to remove barriers so that people can live their best lives. I'm looking forward to the Portland that we become, because I moved here over 30 years ago. When I first moved here, you could listen to music all over the city, any night of the week. Artists, creatives lived all over the city, right? I want us to be that city again, a city where, regardless of your income will not dictate your zip code. And that's what I want. I think my opponent works for a totally different constituent.
How will you ensure that your ideas and your plans are actually put into action and don't just remain conceptual?
Well, as I've shown, I can go from a thought, an idea, a vision, to actually passing law, then having it implemented. I've shown that with Portland Street Response. I'm showing it with the new Police Oversight Board that will have the most, will have a civilian oversight of our police. It is clear that when the community passed it by over an 80% margin, they did not trust that our current system really held police accountable for inappropriate behavior. And we know that's true because the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division continues to tell us that rather than getting better, we're getting worse. And so, I've shown that I know how systems work, I know how to pass laws, and then I know how to implement them. And I know how to bring the right stakeholders together so that we come up with good solutions. My opponent would like you to believe I don't get along with anybody, but I could not have been so successful in 3.5 years if I did not get along with a lot of people.
Lastly here, if homelessness is someone's #1 concern, why should they vote for you?
If homelessness is their #1 concern, they should vote for me because I'm the only candidate that understands the economic cliff that workers are experiencing. I know what people are seeing who are fortunate enough to have homes is but for grace, but for a paycheck, but for a lost job, there go I. So someone who understands what it's like to be a working person, someone who understands how systems work, and someone who's been able to show, both at the legislative level in Multnomah County when I worked for the chair there for 12 years, and now here at the city. I'm the one that knows how all these systems work, and I know we need all of them in order to address our crises on the street, which is houselessness.
All right, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, my pleasure.